Alrighty, so
do that API last so I can leave home and be there in time for it.
Yeah, it'll be last.
Okay, perfect.
We can stall.
Oh.
Okay. Just tell me offline how much time you need. Okay, so this are we live?
Yeah, we are.
Perfect. So this API was previously approved. Great. However, when this was approved, you see how some of the APIs use char8 in addition to char, like that decode first rune, decode from n, stuff like that.
Yep.
We don't have char8.
Yep.
So if you scroll all the way to the very bottom, there is an open question, which is, okay, so let's assume that we want to take read-only span of byte, because read-only span of char8 at the moment's off the table.
Mm-hmm.
What do we call the method? I had proposed decode UTF8 and decode UTF8 from end because the approved APIs were decode and decode from end. And putting UTF8 in the method name says, I am going to interpret this span of byte as UTF8. In the future, if we wanted to decode a span of byte as UTF7 for whatever weird reason, or UTF blorg, then we would have a decode UTF blorg method, which would have the exact same signature otherwise.
Don't you think it would be unlikely to the point where if we ever have to do this, we just introduce those methods as decode UTF7 and just leave that as decode?
We don't have any other APIs anywhere else in the framework where we take read-only span of byte and treat it as UTF8 without UTF8 being in the type or the method name.
I thought the general practice was that we name the parameter like UTF8 text or something.
We actually haven't done that anywhere. All of the places where we take read-only span of byte as UTF8, they're on types like UTF8 reader, UTF8 parser, the UTF8 JSON parser, or UTF8 JSON reader.
I thought there was also places where we explicitly named the parameter UTF8 something.
There are, but we always do that in addition to putting UTF8 somewhere in the type or method name.
I think I'm generally okay with the method name or the type name. It's just, it seems in this case somewhat unfortunate because all the other ones are just overloads.
Yeah. Well, that's why this was originally dependent on char8 being approved.
Should we just make this consistent with the rest at least?
How so?
So then we call them all decode UTF8?
Well,
so decode UTF16 and decode UTF8?
Because then it's at least consistent. Like otherwise it seems very unfortunate that you have some that are called decode and they are implicitly either of them, and then there's one that is explicitly UTF8.
We could, generally we don't force UTF encodings in people's faces when they're using char. Like we don't force people to realize that sequences of char are UTF16. It's just data.
Yeah, maybe we should.
Maybe we should. Like maybe the category of user who's going to use this API is cognizant of that fact.
Yeah, to me, it's more about
But we assume it's UTF-16, right?
If it's a read-only span of char, it should be. I mean, it's not required to be, but if you fabricated a read-only span of char that contains something that's not UTF-16,
but for us, it's
we're going to misinterpret it.
Right? Yeah.
And there's no other type we can put them on, right? We don't have a UTF-8 type where we could just put them and make it implicit there, right?
We could put these on a UTF-8 type, absolutely. They don't have to live here. We already approved a UTF-8 type previously.
I guess that has other problems. Now you have to ruin things spread across several types, which right. We have no UTF-16 type, right? So that's it.
Well, we would remove this and put it onto a different type of them.
Yeah.
Well, the other idea is to have like enum telling like what encoding using file encodings and so on.
So introduce an enum or introduce an encoding, I guess.
Yeah, it's like whatever encoding.
Literally take an encoding.
I don't think
not
coding is
taking
what you
coding,
want.
but at least like enum is saying like UTF-8 and I'm decoding UTF-8.
It's not a bad idea. We could just throw if
if it is
something
else, yeah. So, and by doing that, we don't have to name every method with the encoding name.
Well, the char one clearly wouldn't take an encoding enum, right? It would just be like we can tell from the signature it's UTF-16.
Right.
Right.
At that point, I would probably want to call it decode bytes then, instead of just decode.
Yeah.
I think so.
Well, I'd hope this will take 3 minutes. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe that was a bit too starry-eyed.
I think we have never ever reviewed an API where somebody claimed it's only a few minutes in a few minutes.
We have.
It's clearly was a mistake.
It was. They were my APIs.
Be agile.
Yeah, so to me, like I don't have strong preferences on method name versus whatever. Like the only thing that I don't like is that based on the input type, you sometimes have overload, sometimes you have method names with grouping, right? Like that seems unfortunate.
Yeah.
So like whatever we do, I would just prefer that we are consistent with the other ones. And personally, I could live with the fact that we just call it decode and then we just have read-only span of byte and we call the parameter UTF8 text. Like because I mean everything else seems rather unlikely, right? I mean I understand that it's not ideal, but it's unlikely. We would
So
do
let me
something
explain
else.
how that will break in the future. It would prevent us from adding decode of read-only span of char8 in the future. The reason it would prevent this is because the proposal for UTF-8 string is implicitly convertible to both read-only span of byte and read-only span of char8, which means that if you were to pass a UTF-8 string in here, you'd get compiler error because it's an ambiguous overload.
Unless betterness says that it defaults to the char8.
Is that a thing we can do?
Yeah, don't hold your breath on that one. Would be my
Betterness.
Well, so given that it would be a new language feature, you didn't have string literals before.
Yeah.
And therefore, you could never have been in the scenario before where it would have had to have picked one versus the other.
Oh, you absolutely can. You don't need string literals to have a UTF.
No. Given that when that the scenario only comes up when you do declare a string literal,
Yeah.
and they didn't exist before, the compiler at that point could say that if you have a string literal in those two, then it prefers this one over this one.
No, that's in the scenario I'm thinking of is you have a local literally typed as UTF-8 string, and now you pass it in here as a parameter, relying on the implicit conversion. And now the call site will fail.
And that's because the compiler or we in the framework will say that it's implicitly convertible to both.
The actual type has implicit conversion operators, at least in the current proposal.
well, I mean we could decide not to do it and rely on language for doing that and to just have explicit conversion methods. Right?
We could do that, yeah.
Yeah, if you made it explicit and then said that the language would support the implicit conversion, assuming that they were going to do that, then you could avoid the overload resolution problem, and we could then default to the UTF-8 char, which is probably the better overload in the long term anyway.
Yeah, I'm curious like what the language team's view on backcompat is, right? Because you could have a lower level compiler or with an older version of C# using the later API set, and the question is that. But I guess if there's no implicit conversion, and then generally speaking, like if you make something that is ambiguous, not ambiguous, that's not a breaking change. But the question is, can you create cases where both would compile, but to different outputs? But if we have no implicit conversions, then that's hard to imagine.
We could also remove the implicit conversion. That's an answer.
I would also think that if you were to do it, then having explicit conversion to byte, but implicit conversion to UTF-8 char would be the way to go.
Yeah.
Because that would be similar to char and ushort, which some people do themselves explicitly and interrupt stuff.
That is one of the reasons why I'm generally not a fan of the proposal from the language team to solve these problems via target typing, because target typing, by definition, puts you in the spot that it will never work for existing overloads. Like the new type will never be more specific than the old type. And that is very unfortunate, because in many cases you want actually the new thing to be more specific, and then you're basically screwed and you have to do something like what we do here, which is not what we want.
So another option is we could simply unapprove these very particular APIs. The only consumer I have for them right now is the web encoder stuff, which could rely on them as an internal implementation detail.
So which ones would you unapprove?
The UTF-8 ones, in general. The ones that work on reading the span of byte.
Yeah, that was my other question. Can we just wait until we decide what to do with UTF-8
Yeah, we could, again, it would mean that we would have to throw a bunch of code into the shared library instead of just rely on something exposed from system runtime. But it would work.
So what's the problem And you could just say we can't get into it right now, but what's the problem with exposing char8 in the framework as an opaque type with no operators, so the compiler can, in the future, when it does support it, expose checked and unchecked versions without having to worry about back compat?
That was suggested at the last review and shot down.
I think the general problem is it's similar to what we discussed yesterday when we talked to the language folks about async link. I understand the general desire to say if we want to do language work, we should do it at the same time we do the API work, because you don't want to corner yourself in a mode where you ship something and then you no longer can do the language work that you wanted, right? Yeah. Because as soon as you ship the type, if you want any sort of semantics that are beyond what you shipped, that's fine. But if it conflicts with what you shipped, then you're screwed. And it's very hard to know what will conflict until you actually go through the motions of designing it. And that's why I think the general idea is that we can decide to ship it without, but we need to at least go to the motion of designing it. So we can't really, basically save time and not designing it.
Well, this is going to keep coming up with types.
Oh, totally.
Well.
I think that's one of the reasons why I think we need to look at UTF8 char. The only problem is that it's the same problem with many other things. I have a hard time reviewing UTF8 char without UTF8 string, because I think these types also have to kind of like work together, right? And so same thing there. You kind of want to design both, and then maybe we decide only to ship one at a time. But you need to basically have a design that says, well, if we were to ship it and if we were to do the language work, how does this whole thing work in tandem, and how can we stage this without breaking changes? And I think that's they just haven't done the work. That's why we kind of say like it's something we can do targeted, right? We would have to do the whole thing, at least design wise. So then the fix for this will be we only have the char one then.
Yep.
And then the other one would be what, internal, effectively?
Effectively, yeah. Because it would be like I have consumers for this, but the consumers are in CoreFX.
Yeah. But nobody else depends on Rune Upstack, right? ASP.NET doesn't depend on that, right? So they wouldn't care.
It's really only used by components that deal with text processing. ASP.NET's not really a consumer.
I'm curious what Miguel would think of this, because if you don't have any way to do it from UTF8, that you could argue kind of defeats the point, but I guess you can just say later. Yeah. Okay, so then let me try to summarize what we just said. My taskbar is completely broken. I have like 12 programs running, and according to my taskbar, I only have 2 programs running. So that's why I can't find anything in my taskbar. Not helpful. We decided to close the as we either want to expose them as an overload mode, give different. Yeah, is there any strong feeling on not? I mean, I think we briefly talked about this, but what if you just suffix them all?
UTF-16, UTF-8, and so on.
Yeah.
Again, that would work. And if I know Miguel's not here, and I can't speak for him, but he has previously made statements where he expects that people using APIs along these lines do have some kind of understanding about UTF encodings and probably would not be tripped up by us having those suffixes.
I think my only concern with the suffixes is that if we do them here before we have UTF-8 char, then we're going to need to continue doing that after we have UTF-8 char for consistency. And
I would say that on that type, yes. I mean, if we add overloads to the code or decode from end, then I would continue doing that. But I think it's okay to say once we have a type, it's similar to how we do it with optional parameters, right? Like we haven't gone back in time and added all, like we moved our overloads in favor of optional arguments.
We also can't do that.
Exactly. So basically, we just said screw it. Like we just say on an existing type where we use overloads, we keep using overloads, and on new types we use optionals if we can. Right? You just You just try to get a point where you exploit the new things, but you also like what I don't like about this current proposal of not exposing UTF-8. It seems like just because we have a minor issue in the API service, we just don't give you a feature. I think that's kind of like steering too far. Like if the fix is just suffix them all with a consistent prefix, but then you can at least do everything. Then later on, if you have a better type, so that we can do overloads without the suffix, great. But like that's not drop the whole feature work on that. That seems a bit over the top.
I would think that for consistency across the entire like ecosystem, that even in these types, it would be better just to name the parameter name so it's clear that it's UTF-8, rather than trying to say for APIs before we had UTF-8 char, we add a prefix or suffix, and then after we have it, we don't. I think having the parameter name and the method names be consistent with no suffix is better overall.
Yeah, I guess all I'm trying to get is that I don't think we create, like by doing the suffixes, I don't think we constrain ourselves in the future. All I'm saying is that I think we can. There may be cases where we can have better APIs, and maybe in some cases we decide against it for consistency. But that's, I don't think either way. I don't think it's a big deal.
So actually, jumping on that real fast, should we quickly change the parameter name from source to UTF-16 source on the char overlays?
Yeah, I'm fully with that.
Yeah, I think that would make sense.
Yeah,
because that way, it's if you're looking at the parameter names, like it's explicitly clear this is how we're going to interpret the data, not as UCS2 but as UTF-16. Because as much as we say strings are UTF-16, some people still use UCS2.
Okay, then let me then make sure that I get the folder right. So we would say we would have decode UTF-16. We would have decode UTF-8. Decode from end UTF-16, I guess.
I would probably put from end at the end.
You would say decode UTF-16 from end,
yes.
And then decode UTF-8 from end.
Yeah, that way decode UTF whatever all cluster together.
Yeah.
And then we said we would call source
UTF-16 source. Yeah. Regardless of whether we change the method name, changing the parameter name is probably goodness. Especially since we're very explicitly putting in your face with these APIs that we're talking about UTF encodings.
And then we still have the same syntax, right? Out room, out in, chars consumed, correct?
Yeah. Actually, I think I've convinced myself to put it in the method name as well. Because we do explicitly want to put in your face, we're talking about UTF transforms.
All right. Okay, let me just copy and paste this guy in here then. I can find my cursor again. So, all right. Does that look right to everybody?
So that is the new approved surface?
Yep.
Okay.
I mean, if you agree with what I've written here.
It's fine.
My only disagreement is you have 8 ordered below 16.
Whatever. It'll get sorted in the reference.
Yes.
I actually don't think it will. I think we still do logical sort rather than.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Compiler.
We have an up for grabs approved API to add the alphanumeric sort,
Nice.
but no one's implemented it yet.
So this one, if the last one was estimated at 3 minutes and took 30, this one was estimated at 15, so it should take 2.5 hours.
I like your optimism. I think we could probably do better than that. But
just add a 0. The general idea behind this is this is more complex enumeration over textual data. So we previously approved enumerate runes, and enumerate runes does silent substitution of the replacement character question mark within a black diamond.
Right.
If it sees invalid data, this enumeration explicitly tells you I found something invalid and I did a substitution. This is used primarily if you're enumerating and you need to know that an error occurred so that you can abort or do whatever the appropriate thing is for your scenario. This particular API is also Go Compete. It's something that that Miguel was pushing for in terms of syntax, not necessarily the API shape. I have an example 1 or 2 screens down that shows how this looks against when you compare it against Go. So there, the first snippet there is the tutorial at golang.org for how to enumerate their runes over strings. And the second is basically that exact same sample using these APIs.
So this is a for loop that gives you the index and the rune values. It's basically giving you a tuple for each item in that.
Yeah, so it's giving you back a proper struct, and the struct has a decompose function.
So it's the same as ours.
Yeah. This was based on feedback I was previously given when I brought an earlier version of this API.
Well, I'm not a fan of Go, but that does look more concise than what we have. It does look better than what we have, actually. Anyway, but
what scenario people would use this exactly?
So the scenario for this is not necessarily, I don't really expect new code to be written on top of these APIs. The scenario for this is making it easier to port existing code over from Go to C# using our API surface.
If that's the case, index and rune
should be probably swapped, yeah. I would argue that Go probably did it incorrectly here.
Yeah, I would agree, but if the goal here is for ease of porting, then
yeah, because we have an overload of decompose, which just returns rune value, because that's what most people care about.
Right.
And it seems strange to put that after in the more expansive decomposition.
Yeah, the concern would be if it's for ease of portability, then just using var, someone would easily do start index rune value, and start index would be the rune, and explicitly typing it rather than var would of course catch that. But
so my understanding is that, I mean, you said you don't expect new code to be written like this, but I would think that things like the VS editor or a terminal window that basically provides a text editor would do the exact same thing, right? Because that's literally what you want to do when you implement an editor.
If you're implementing an editor, yes, you could. The API that we had just approved can also be used for the same scenario.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like I think this one would be when you write it on the screen, right? You want to know where the thing came from.
So this, if you're talking about display, like inside of Word, for instance, this API is not really going to help you.
Why not?
The reason for that is when you start considering things like how characters start getting composed on top of each other with things like accents, for instance. Ligatures, yeah. This is not necessarily going to assist you. What Unicode has a concept of is what a lot of people just call graphemes, which are sequences of characters that, when displayed, look like a single thing.
So there would be 4 runes, but they happen to be drawn on top of each other, for instance?
It would be multiple runes all back to back. The example that most people are familiar with is emoji, for instance.
Yeah.
Imagine something like so there's an emoji for like firefighter. There's an emoji for the female symbol, and there's an emoji for like a medium skin modifier. Those are 3 separate symbols, so they would get decoded as 3 separate runes, but when you display them, you smash them all together and display a single logical glyph as a medium-skinned female firefighter.
Or A with an umlaut modifier displays A with umlaut.
Yeah. Most people just use the actual character A with umlaut, which is still a single rune, but yeah, it could be decomposed into multiple if you really wanted.
Yeah. And we have functions on system.globalization.
Yeah, we can normalize it, yeah.
As a non-English native speaker, I would still assert if the world would speak English, it would be way better off. It's too complicated. Anyway.
This can happen with English.
Yes. Oh, it does, yeah.
Yeah, we should just change that to something simpler. We should all just speak binary. That would be so much easier.
So one of the other things we could do is we could also defer this API until someone's explicitly asking for it. It was intended to make porting easier.
So I was under the impression, so what's the new thing here? It's literally just this type that gives you the pair back?
Basically, yeah.
Well, I also
And tells you if something got replaced under the covers.
But didn't we already approve that API?
It was approved with. It wasn't approved. It was marked as needs work. If you scroll up to the very top, there's a link to the old one.
Because I mean, this looks very familiar. Like I think we had this discussion on that there should be a tuple over that can be custom struct with a deconstruct method.
Somewhere in here.
Somebody was passive aggressive.
The name rune was still
that was the
still
whole
causing heartburn here.
Well, yeah.
Anyway, if you go into the files change, there's the comments from the review there. Yes.
Yeah, Unicode scalable. Yeah, that's right. We even had 3 of them, right?
Yeah.
I mean, length would be.
This was how you enumerate, yeah.
That was one of the things where Go was not great because it doesn't give you the length. You have to basically compute it yourself.
Right.
It doesn't give you the running length. But okay, you basically took this feedback and basically designed the API according to the feedback, if you will.
Basically, yeah.
That makes sense. So it's rune position. So I think one question that Christoph will probably ask is, why is it on a nested type, or should it be a nested type?
A nested type under
rune. Like if it's literally only used to enumerate runes, and if you usually decompose it, why would you have a public type for that?
I actually talk about that in this proposal. Scroll down a little bit.
All right. You are prepared, my friend.
Yeah. So scroll up. So the enumerator itself is under rune. Like you'll see that's a nested type under rune.
Yep.
The position I brought as a top-level type in system text, just because that would make it easier to actually have as a local.
Yeah.
Or if we imagine people would use var, it doesn't matter.
Well, you could just have rune dot position, but yeah, I agree with you. I'm generally not a fan of nested types. I just know that that's a question that.
Like, I mean, is it appropriate to have nested types here?
So I think in general, like I think nested types make sense when you basically never utter their names, right? So for example, all the structures enumerators, you never declare anything with that signature, right? Sure. Like you either convert it to an enumerable or you just have a for each loop, right?
The other downside to these is if you type rune dot, these types will show up in IntelliSense, right. These nested types, and I would very much like to avoid that if possible.
What do we do for struct-based enumerators? Don't we hide them? I thought we were hiding them in IntelliSense. I mean,
we don't for the list enumerator, for example.
Maybe we never considered that. I think what was the type we recently did this for?
So list of T doesn't have any static APIs off of it, I believe. So there would be no reason for anyone to write list of T dot. Rune, however, has a bunch of static APIs hanging off of it, so there is reason for people to do rune dot.
It might also, stepping back to the earlier conversation about text editor, just testing out 4 or 5 of them now, VS Code, Visual Studio, Notepad++, Notepad 2, they all don't count female firefighter as a single glyph, they count it as 3.
Because of the 0 with joiner.
Yeah, so they actually count it as like if you can step through each individual internal glyph, and it shows you like moving third of the way through the character, and it tells you selected 3 columns, selected 1 character.
Microsoft Word has an option for that.
Yeah.
While you navigate with the keyboard, either you go like 3 times or you go just 1 time.
Yeah. Well, and if you do things like control over, it actually counts it as a single. It's just like when you're looking at the column listing and the number of columns selected versus the number of characters selected actually tells you it's 3.
But you can actually insert in between, right?
Yeah, and you can insert in between.
I can actually get the caret in between and delete, let's say, the skin
Yeah,
modifier.
Yeah, and then
also.
it will change it or break it apart.
If you can edit it, enter 3, so you can delete one of them.
So having the actual position would be useful for some APIs here as well.
All right, so let me just look at what we currently have in the room, because so we would say enumerate room positions, and then we have enumerate room position. Oh, it's interesting. It's a static. Yeah, this goes back to the same problem from earlier, right?
Yep. UTF-16, UTF-8, but it sounds like we actually have a scenario for that now, or a recommendation for that now.
I just make those fuckers not really long, right? I mean, it's already quite long. Maybe we should just call it enumerate positions.
Since it's already on room.
Yeah, you're already on room. What other position could you possibly get?
Sure.
Then it's at least not longer than what we have.
How do you like verbosity now?
Yeah, to an extent. I mean, if there's information that is net new, sure. Just repeating what I already know, it becomes tedious.
And again, these are hanging off of span, not memory, not string, not anything else, so reconstruct enumerator. If you need to use this across an await or something, like just use a memory of t and then call dot span after.
Or just copy it into a tuple.
Yeah.
Well, but that means, how do I, well, I guess I can slice.
Yeah.
I was about to say, how do I resume? But yeah, you can just.
And you can slice because you have the offset.
By the way, what's the length in? It's in number of characters, right?
It's a number of code units.
Sorry, number of rooms.
Number of elements in the span.
Oh, really?
Yep.
Oh, so index is this, yeah, of course.
As in, if you call span.slice, that index is the right thing to pass in.
Right, so that would be enumerate what? Position UTF-8, I guess?
We have some other APIs hanging off of Rune that that just take read-only span of char and don't have UTF-16 in the name. Maybe we should take a look at those as well.
I think you swapped them in the return value.
I did, yes. That's just a copy paste.
So for a moment I'm like, what? I thought I understand this.
You knew what I meant. It's all good.
Alright, so of course now I fucked it up. Here we go. Sweet. So let's do this. Should we just call them an UTF position enumerator as well?
Because they're nested under room?
Yeah.
Sure. The actual type is still called room position, though. I can nest the enumerators under room position, which would also solve the problem of not having them show up in IntelliSense when you type room dot.
Sure. So that means now that would be room position dot UTF-16 enumerator, I suppose?
Yes, and UTF-8 enumerator.
I mean...
Room dot position dot UTF-8 enumerate.
Yeah, this is not the ML.NET review.
Which now begs the question, should the methods be also on room position?
Good.
Room position dot enumerate?
Enumerate from UTF-16 and UTF-8.
Or we just completely strip the thumb, or just enumerate UTF-16 and enumerate UTF-8.
That also works.
Yeah, no, it gets short. I like that.
You like short? Okay.
Well, I like concise when you can get away with it. Public, what is it? Struct. Okay, so then those guys would go in there. Yep, and they deliver struct.
Yeah. Because everything's overspent.
Yep.
And again, because we hand the offset back to you, you can always reslice any memory that you have.
Yeah, really. Yeah, I think there's nothing to review on the actual members of the numerators because they're pretty vanilla and straightforward.
Yeah.
And this UTF8 one and 8 one. Of course. Alright, so then room position itself. So it's equatable, it makes sense. Would it be comparable?
I don't know how you would compare it.
Oh, by startIndex?
But if it has the same start index, does that mean it's equal now?
I mean, I guess clearly that's not right, but I mean,
Wouldn't it need to have both the same start index, length, and rune for equality?
Well, all four would have to be equal.
well, for equality for sure, but
Yeah.
if you compare them, that would be weird because what would the value be when the start index is different and the rune is different? Are they lower or upper? So you would have to decide that.
I don't think it makes sense to sort these, to be honest. And
Yeah.
if you can't sort it, comparable doesn't really make sense.
Yeah,
You
and if
can truly sort them by
From-
just selecting.
From the
start
name,
index.
it's called the rune position, so it gives you some positions.
Well,
You
and-
can think about it like
If you did
Yeah.
want to sort them, you could write your own compare
Yeah.
that says sort by start index, and then the onus is on you to ensure that they're all from the same
Yeah.
span.
I think that's fair.
So there is a difference between what we do and what Go does. The difference is that if we encounter invalid data, Go just skips 1 byte when in its enumeration. We might skip more than 1 byte, depending on how much data was invalid, or depending on very particularly why the data was invalid, because we follow to a T the Unicode recommendation here. That is behavior the framework already has. I'm not changing it.
Yeah.
Um,
Should we offer a deconstruct that gives you was replaced as well?
At that point, you may as well just use the entire position because it's giving you all 4 properties.
Yeah, you can't over. Yeah, you cannot add. Yeah, you would have to. Yeah, basically, you can only have one that gives you 4. You cannot have 2 that gives you 3.
Right.
Because you can't overload.
And as Tanner also suggested, maybe swap start index and rune in both of those.
Yeah, that's maybe okay. So let's first do this.
And if people do ask for a deconstruct that has all 4, well then we can add it later.
You should. So what
Why
should
not
the
just
order
use
be?
the
Order
struct
should
itself
be.
at that point?
Some people
Well, the thing with start index though, what's sucky is now you have start index, rune, and then length.
If all you cared about was rune and absolutely nothing else, use this simple enumerator. This one. This API is not intended for you.
No, I
All
get
you
that.
want
I'm
is
saying
rune.
is that if we make rune the second argument, then if you deconstruct into 3 values, it looks very odd because now you have start index, rune, and then length.
yeah.
It just seems very out of place. Like logically, I think you want rune start index, and if you port from Go, then well, you have to accommodate 6 other things as well. So in that sense, it's not.
I
the thing
think
that makes
at
it or
one
breaks it.
point I suggested an analyzer, which would say if you have, like let's say a deconstruct method, or you're passing things into a method, and the name that you're passing for a particular index matches the name of another index, it should be flagged. And if we had such an analyzer, that would help catch people porting from Go.
So one other thing is that in Go, both the start index and the rune value itself are both typed as int. Here, the rune is typed as rune, not as int, which means if you try to treat it as an int, the compiler will flag it, even without an analyzer.
I was about to say, like, if the type is, like, it really sucks for start and length, right, if you mess them up because they're both ints. But in this case, even if you swap them, I mean, nothing will make sense, right? So it's not...
Yeah.
It's just, I mean, the only thing I would buy is that if you port large amounts of code from Go, it just sucks because you have to keep swapping everything all the time. But I mean, given that the syntax is so different, it's probably the least of your concerns. It's more like if you have to rewrite the entire algorithm, that's much harder than just syntactic rewriting.
Sure. And the reason length is promoted as a first-class property on the struct is because even though rune has a length property hanging off of it, it might give you a different value.
Right.
Because if we replaced it, for instance, like the replacement rune is FFFD, which is going to have length 3 or 2, or I'm sorry, it'll have length 1 or 3 depending. We might give you a different answer.
So you cannot statically determine it by looking at the rule.
Right. So concrete scenario is we see the byte FF when we're enumerating data. We replace it with FFFD. We change the length on you. I guess I should also be looking at comments on YouTube to see if anyone is calling me on my BS.
Good point. I have not paid attention to the chat at all.
Yeah.
I probably should feel bad for that. It also seems there's no comment in chat.
Okay.
Consider something on the match.
Fowler, are you still on the line?
Nope.
Okay.
He dropped out.
So he's on his way then.
Yeah, any other feedback on the type? I think the type looks fine.
By the way, this type is built on top of the decode APIs that we just approved. Like that, all of these are kind of stacked on top of each other. We start with a basic layer and then build higher and higher layers like this on top of it.
Right.
Oh, the other question. Should this have a public constructor?
Do we expect anybody constructed?
I don't think so, but I don't know if it's typical that these structs have public constructors.
Any reason not to have one? I mean, you already have that one, clearly, right? So it's just a matter of making that public, I suppose.
Yeah.
I would probably just make it public. There's no harm in it, and it's a pure data holder, right? So
yeah, and if someone wanted to create
That's
their
something,
own
yeah.
enumerator that returns room position, then they could. Like maybe they want an ASCII specific enumerator.
Or I mean, there's no harm in making it public, I guess.
yeah.
Okay. And if we add more properties in the future, we'll just have an overload of the constructor.
Yeah.
Okay.
But given that your shit is read-only, like it's very hard to imagine where you would do something smart.
So the constructor literally would be these same properties in the same order camel cased.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Works for me.
Anybody else? Going. On. Losing the room? No.
Time left.
Yeah.
Okay, that's it with this one.
Great.
Let me mark this as. Let me copy and paste the notes in, and then.
Thanks, Derek.
Thank you.
Thank you. Showing quorum is happening.
Eric, are you still on the line?
He is, but he might not be listening.
Okay, that's fine.
Yes, I'm on the line.
I wanted to, before we do the encoder stuff, handle the API review that Eric brought up this morning. There was no issue for it because it's so fresh. But I can show you what it is real fast.
Yep, that totally works for me.
Go to source.net.
Source.net.
It's in the meeting chat too.
Oh yeah, okay.
What's the type I'm looking for?
Type in source.net. Type rune. What is it?
It's called
And rune.
tryingcode to UTF8 bytes.
Yeah, just type tryingcode and you'll see both overloads. Yeah. So tryingcode is a public approved API that's already in the ref assembly, the one that emits to a span of char and outs the number of chars written. It's the one directly above this.
Is that this one?
Yeah. So, like I said, tryingcode has already been approved. This one is currently being used by system text JSON, even though it hasn't been approved and is not exposed in the ref assemblies.
What? This one?
Yeah.
Tryingcode to UTF8 bytes?
Yes. System text JSON uses it.
It has a room somewhere?
Yeah.
How to get a room? Middle?
It's reading them, I believe, from UTF-16, I believe, in certain cases. Anyway, so we should consider making this like actually public.
We should.
Like, honest to God public.
And then maybe we should rename the other one too.
UTF-16?
Tryingcode to UTF-16 bytes, yeah.
Is that okay? Well, it doesn't encode to bytes, it encodes to chars.
Oh, fuck me. I see. This one would you just try. Okay, then the other one would be just tryingcode to UTF-16.
Yeah, and Eric just pasted into the Teams window the call site where that is invoked.
So then.
Yeah, so this is used in the JSON unescaping logic. Because in JSON, all astral values are escaped as /u high surrogate /u low surrogate. So to unescape it, we need to turn it back into UTF-16 and then back into UTF-8. And that's where this is being used.
Right, so we would have this one. I think this looks fine to me, but I'm also not an expert in the pattern. Is this the pattern we usually use?
For what?
Like for dealing with writing to something?
Yeah, so you take the destination as span, and then you out the number of things that you wrote, and then return success or not. Like that pattern is correct,
Yeah.
but the name of the method is wanting.
Okay, so this is,
Why would the encoding fail?
If there's not enough room in the destination, right?
And presumably, if it was bytes that were outside the code range.
You cannot construct a rune from an invalid scalar value. The rune constructor itself would throw.
Unsafe.
If you use unsafe to construct a rune, like God help you, all bets are off at that point.
I think we might be losing the room now.
We only had an hour?
Yeah, I only booked now because it's 45 minutes.
Okay, great.
All right. Then I say thanks online, and then I will disconnect the stream if I find the button in my 300 browser windows.
Yeah, I have